Happy New Year, everybody. COVID-19 has once again pushed instruction online, and so I'm forced to start our new unit, Changes in Latitudes, Changes in Attitudes, online as well. In this unit, we're going to look at a variety of texts from different geographic regions and time periods and talk about how environmental factors influence language and literature. Our statement of inquiry is environment is irresistible. And so, of course, I want to begin with Robert Service. Now, normally I'd be reading this poem to the class, but seeing as we are quarantined again, I figured I could look online and find someone who's done a good job of reciting the Ballad of Blasphemous Bill by Robert Service. And I was wrong. So I'm going to recite it properly for you. I'm including screenshots from the Poetry Foundation website. There's the MLA citation right there. And I can say with some confidence that this is the best version of the Ballad of Blasphemous Bill on YouTube. I've turned comments on for anyone who cares to disagree with me, but keep in mind this is for high school kids, so keep it relatively clean. And now, without further ado, I give you the Ballad of Blasphemous Bill by Robert Service. I took a contract to bury the body of Blasphemous Bill Mackay, whenever, wherever, or whatsoever the manner of death he die. Whether he die in the light of day or under the peak-faced moon, in cabin or dance hall, camp or dive, mucklux or patent shoon, on velvet tundra or virgin peak, by glacier drift or draw, in muskeg hollow or canyon gloom, by avalanche fang or claw, by battle, murder, or sudden wealth, by pestilence, hooch, or lead, I swore on the book I would follow and look till I found my tombless dead. For Bill was a dainty kind of cuss, and his mind was mighty sought on a dinky patch with flowers and grass in a civilized boneyard lot. And where he died, or how he died, it didn't matter a damn, so long as he had a grave with frills and a tombstone epigram. So I promised him, and he paid the price in good Chichaco coin, which the same I blowed in that very night down in the Tenderloin. Then I painted a 3-foot slab of pine. Here lies poor Bill Mackay. And I hung it on my cabin wall, and I waited for Bill to die. Years passed away, and at last one day came a squaw with a story strange of a long deserted line of traps way back of the Bighorn Range, of a little hut by the Great Divide, and a white man stiff and still, lying there by his lonesome self, and I figured it must be Bill. So I thought of the contract I made with him, and I took down from the shelf the swell black box with the silver plate he'd picked out for himself, and I packed it full of grub and hooch, and I slung it on the sleigh. Then I harnessed up my team of dogs and was off at dawn of day. You know what it's like in the Yukon wild when it's 69 below? When the ice worms wriggle their purple heads through the crust of the pale blue snow? When the pine trees crack like little guns in the silence of the wood, and the icicles hang down like tusks under the parka hood? When the stovepipe smoke breaks sudden off, and the sky is weirdly lit, and the careless feel of a bit of steel burns like a red-hot spit? When the mercury is a frozen ball, and the frost fiend stalks to kill? Well, it was just like that day when I set off to look for Bill. Oh, the awful hush that seemed to crush me down on every hand as I blundered blind with a trail to find through that blank and bitter land, half dazed, half crazed in the winter wild with its grim, heartbreaking woes and the ruthless strife for a grip of life that only the sourdough knows. North by the compass, north I pressed, river and peak and plain. Past like a dream I slept to lose and waked to dream again. River and plain and mighty peak, and who could stand unawed? As their summits blazed, he could stand undazed at the foot of the throne of God. North, aye, north, through a land accursed, shunned by the scouring brutes. And all I heard was my own harsh word and the whine of the Malamutes. Till at last I came to a cabin squat, built in the side of a hill, and I burst in the door, and there on the floor, frozen to death, lay Bill. Ice, white ice like a winding sheet, sheathing each smoke-grimed wall. Ice on the stovepipe, ice on the bed, ice gleaming over all, sparkling ice on the dead man's chest, glittering ice in his hair, ice on his fingers, ice in his heart, ice in his glassy stare. Hard as a log, and trussed like a frog, with his arms and legs outspread, I gazed at the coffin I brought for him, and I gazed at the gruesome dead. And at last I spoke. Bill liked his joke, but still gall darn his eyes. A man had ought to consider his mates and the way he goes and dies. Have you ever stood in an Arctic hut in the shadow of the pole with a little coffin 6 by 3 and a grief you can't control? Have you ever sat by a frozen corpse that looks at you with a grin and that seems to say, you may try all day, but you'll never jam me in? I'm not a man of the quittin' kind, but I never felt so blue as I sat there gazing at that stiff and studying what I do. Then I rose and kicked off the husky dogs that were nosing round about, and I lit a roaring fire in the stove, and I started to thaw Bill out. Well, I thawed and thawed for 13 days, but it didn't seem no good. His arms and legs stuck out like pegs, as if they was made of wood, till at last I said it ain't no use. He's froze too hard to thaw. He's obstinate, and he won't lie straight. So I guess I gotta saw. So I sawed off poor Bill's arms and legs, and I laid him snug and straight in the little coffin he picked hisself with the dinky silver plate. And I came nigh near to shedding a tear as I nailed him safely down. Then I stowed him away in my Yukon sleigh, and I started back to town. So I buried him, as the contract was, in a narrow grave and deep, and there he's waiting the great clean-up when the judgment sluice heads sweep. And I smoke my pipe, and I meditate in the light of the midnight sun, and sometimes I wonder if they was the awful things I'd done. And as I sit and the parson talks, expounding of the law, I often think of poor old Bill and how hard he was to saw.